I want you to imagine something with me. Close your eyes for just a second and picture a young girl, maybe 14, maybe 15, standing at the edge of a camp filled with tents and sheep and the smell of dust and fire. She is watching her brothers play, laughing, roughhousing, their voices carrying across the evening air. But she is quiet. She is always quiet. Because in her world, daughters don't get the loud stories. They don't get the long songs. They get one line, maybe two, and then the page turns. Her name is Dinah, though most people call her Dinah now, like the world even forgot how to say it right. And tonight, you and I, we are not turning the page. Tonight, we are staying right here with her because her pain was real. Her silence was loud, and heaven never forgot her name. You see, Dinah was the only daughter of Jacob, the man who would become Israel, the father of a nation. She was born to Leah, the wife Jacob never really wanted, the one he was tricked into marrying, the one who spent her whole life trying to earn a love that was already given to her sister Rachel. Can you feel that tension already? A family built on favoritism, on jealousy, on wounds that never quite healed. Leah gives Jacob 6 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and then finally a daughter, Dinah. And the Bible mentions her birth in one single verse, Genesis 30:21, almost like an afterthought. Afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. That's it. No celebration, no prophecy, just a name. But names matter to God. And tonight her name matters to us. Let me take you back to a time around 1900 BC, maybe a little later, when Jacob has finally come home after 20 years running from his brother Esau, 20 years working for his uncle Laban, 20 years of being deceived and deceiving others. He comes back to Canaan with 4 women, 11 sons at that point, massive flocks, and a heart still limping from wrestling with God. He settles near a city called Shechem, a real place. Archaeologists have found its ruins in modern-day Nablus in the West Bank. The city was named after its prince, Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, and Jacob buys land there, sets up his tents, builds an altar, calls it El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel. Everything looks peaceful on the surface, but peace in a fractured family is always fragile. Now Dinah is growing up in this camp. We don't know exactly how old she is when the story happens, but she's old enough to go out on her own, old enough to be curious, old enough that the women of Shechem notice her beauty. And one day, she does something completely normal for a girl in that culture. Genesis 34:1 says, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. That's all. She went out to visit the women. Maybe to watch them weave, maybe to hear them laugh, maybe to taste a life that wasn't lived under the constant weight of her family's drama. She just wanted to see how other girls lived. But Shechem the prince saw her, and the Hebrew text is brutal in its honesty. Verse 2, When Shechem the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her and humiliated her. 3 verbs: saw, took, violated. No romance, no consent, no gentleness, just power. He was the prince. She was the foreign girl. In his mind that was enough. And the text says he loved her afterward and spoke tenderly to her. But love that begins with violence is not love. It's possession wearing a mask, and Dinah, for the first time in Scripture, disappears from the story. She never speaks, not one word. From this moment on, men will negotiate over her body, argue over her honor, kill because of her pain, but Dinah herself is silent. Let that sink in for a second. The only daughter of Israel, raped, and the Bible gives her no voice. We don't know if she screamed. We don't know if she fought. We don't know if she froze. We don't know if anyone comforted her that night. The silence is deafening. And maybe that silence is the point, because how many women throughout history have had their stories told only through the men who hurt them or the men who avenged them? Dinah becomes a ghost in her own tragedy. Now Hamor, Shechem's father, goes to Jacob to ask for Dinah as a wife. He offers intermarriage between their people, trade, land, everything. It sounds almost reasonable, like ancient diplomacy. But Jacob stays silent. Genesis 34:5 says, "When Jacob heard that his daughter had been defiled, he held his peace until his sons came in from the field." Silent. Maybe he was afraid. Shechem was a fortified city. Maybe he was calculating. Maybe he was ashamed. But a father's silence in that moment must have felt like another wound to Dinah. Then the brothers come home, and two of them, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers from Leah, they don't stay silent. They burn. The text says they were very angry because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done, and they come up with a plan, cold, calculated, and terrifying. They tell Hamor and Shechem that they cannot give their sister to an uncircumcised man. It would be a disgrace. But if every male in the city gets circumcised, then they can intermarry, become one people. And Hamor and Shechem, blinded by desire and the promise of wealth, agree. Every man in the city is circumcised. 3 days later, when the men are still in agony, unable to move, Simeon and Levi take their swords and slaughter every male in Shechem. Not just the prince, not just Hamor, every man. They loot the city, take the women and children as captives, seize the flocks, the wealth, everything. And then, almost as an afterthought, they go into Shechem's house and take Dinah out. They rescue her. But imagine what that rescue felt like. Walking out of that house, stepping over dead bodies, surrounded by blood and screaming, carried home by brothers who just turned her personal horror into a genocide. When Jacob hears what they've done, his first words are not about Dinah's healing. He says, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land." His reputation, his safety, that's what he cares about. And Simeon and Levi answer with a question that still echoes. Should he treat our sister like a prostitute? They meant it as righteous anger, but their justice killed innocent people. Their vengeance went way beyond protection. And Dinah, still silent. After this, Dinah vanishes from the biblical text. We don't know if she ever married. We don't know if she had children. Jewish tradition says she later gave birth to a daughter from Shechem, a girl named Asenath, who would eventually marry Joseph. But the Bible never confirms that. All we know is that she was wounded, used, silenced, and then forgotten by the story, but not by God. Because years later, when Jacob blesses his sons in Genesis 49, he curses Simeon and Levi for their violence. He says their weapons are weapons of violence, and he scatters them in Israel. The massacre at Shechem had consequences that lasted generations. But Dinah, she gets no blessing, no mention. It's like she was erased. And yet I believe heaven kept her tears in a bottle. I believe the God who saw Hagar in the wilderness saw Dinah in that house. I believe the God who heard the cry of the oppressed heard the cry Dinah was never allowed to speak. Now let me take you to another woman, another silence, another wound that the world tried to bury. Her name is Bathsheba. And if Dinah's story is about violation and vengeance, Bathsheba's story is about power, grief, and the long road to redemption. It's springtime in Jerusalem, around 990 BC. The kings are going out to war, but David, now in his 50s, stays behind in the palace. One evening he walks on the roof and he sees a woman bathing. The text is careful to tell us she was purifying herself after her period, a ritual required by Torah, a private holy act. But David looks too long, and desire turns into action. He sends messengers to take her. The Hebrew word is the same one used for Shechem. He took her, and because he is king, she comes. And that night, A child is conceived in sin. We don't know what Bathsheba felt. We don't know if she protested. We don't know if she was afraid. The text simply says David lay with her, and then she returned home. But later, she sends him a message that changes everything. I am pregnant, and David panics. Her husband Uriah is one of his mighty men, away at war. So David tries to cover it up. He brings Uriah home, gets him drunk, tells him to go sleep with his wife. But Uriah refuses. He sleeps at the palace gate, loyal to his fellow soldiers. So David goes darker. He sends Uriah back to the front with a letter to Joab. Uriah is carrying his own death sentence. Put him where the fighting is fiercest, then pull back. And Uriah dies. Bathsheba mourns her husband. Then David takes her as wife, and she bears a son. But God is not mocked. He sends Nathan the prophet with a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. David rages, "That man deserves to die." And Nathan points his finger, "You are the man." The child becomes sick and dies. Bathsheba weeps again. But then, in the ashes of grief, God gives her another son, Solomon. And through a woman the world labeled scandal, God brings the wisest king Israel ever had, and eventually the Messiah himself. You see the pattern. Dinah, Bathsheba, Miriam. Women whose pain was written into the foundation of a nation. Women the text almost skips over, but women God refused to forget. Now walk with me into the wilderness, about 1446 BC. The children of Israel have just crossed the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army is drowned, and the first voice raised in worship is not Moses, it's Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister. She takes a tambourine, all the women follow her with tambourines and dancing, and she sings, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea." Miriam, the little girl who watched over baby Moses in the Nile, now leads a nation in victory. But pride is a slow poison. Years later, Miriam and Aaron begin to criticize Moses because of his Cushite wife. And underneath that criticism is a deeper jealousy. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And God hears. He calls the three of them to the tent of meeting, descends in a pillar of cloud, and defends Moses like a father defends his son. Then the cloud lifts, and Miriam is leprous, white as snow. Aaron begs Moses to intercede. Moses cries, "Oh God, please heal her." And God does, after 7 days of shame outside the camp. Why Miriam and not Aaron? Some say she led the complaint. Some say her influence as a worship leader made her words more dangerous. Some say God was teaching Israel that leadership carries heavier accountability. But Miriam is restored, humbled, yes, silenced in scripture afterward, yes, but restored. 3 women, 3 wounds, 3 silences. Dinah, violated and disappeared. Bathsheba taken and then crowned. Miriam lifted high and then brought low, and in all 3 stories men speak, men act, men decide, but God sees the women. I need you to hear this tonight. If you are carrying a wound no one has ever named, if you have been hurt in ways people moved past too quickly, if your pain was used as someone else's justification for anger or ambition or silence, God saw. He saw Dinah in that house. He saw Bathsheba on that roof. He saw Miriam outside the camp. And he sees you. Your voice may have been taken, but it was never lost in heaven. Your tears may have fallen in secret, but they were gathered. Your story may have been reduced to a footnote, but the author of life has never turned the page on you. And one day, every hidden thing will be brought to light. Every silenced woman will stand in the presence of the God who calls her by name. Dinah will speak. Bathsheba will be honored without shame. Miriam will sing again, this time without pride. And you, yes you, will stand whole, seen, known, and deeply loved. So if this has touched something inside you, If something in Dinah's silence or Bathsheba's grief or Miriam's fall feels like your own story, I want you to do something right now. Type 77 in the comments, not because it feeds an algorithm, but because it tells heaven the wounded are still listening. And then share this with someone who needs to hear that their pain was never wasted, because the Bible is not just a book of heroes and kings. It's a book of wounded women God refused to forget. And your name, your real name, the one you whisper when no one is listening, is written on his hands. You are not forgotten. You never were. And one day the whole world will know the rest of your story. But until then, rest in this. The God who saw Dinah, who saw Bathsheba, who saw Miriam, sees you, and he is still writing.